Hello, everyone. Dr. Ames here. This time, I'd like to talk to you about the areas of concern that we have for managerial ethics. And what we see is that we have three areas that we have to talk about: the relationship of the firm to the employee, and then the opposite, the relationship of the employee to the firm, and then the relationship of the firm to other economic players that are out there. Let's just start with the one on the left, the firm to the employee. We have a couple categories here that we can talk about. For one, the firm has a relationship when it comes to hiring and firing. There are legal and ethical guidelines that organizations should be following. And we ought to be on our guard against bias and discrimination, and so forth. And basically, the idea is with the relationship of the firm to the employees that you should follow the law and you should treat everyone the same. Unfortunately, sometimes, even in particularly in bureaucracies, um, an organization might go through all the motions to satisfy the legal side of things. They may post a job, interview, accept resumes, and then select someone. But what they end up doing is really hiring the person they had planned on hiring all along. And quite often you'll hear that referred to as the good old boy network and so forth. Um, it's a factor of our culture, and it's that way in many places in the world. Um, but it is your responsibility as an organization to prevent that as much as possible, to make sure that you really do have uh, hiring and firing and selecting procedures that are fair and so forth, and do follow ethical guidelines as well as just what the law says. Um, there's also an obligation from the firm to the employee when it comes to wages and working conditions. And there can be some controversy here. For instance, right now we could easily point out that there's some unfairness in the fact that women in general make about 23% less than men do for jobs doing the same work. Um, so that's not fair when it comes to wages and working conditions. Um, and there are other issues in wages and working conditions. The firm has to make sure that you have safe, ethical places to work. And certainly you have to do all the things that are necessary in business and so forth to make sure that they have all the materials and resources they need. But that's not so much the ethical side. Um, we also have to say that the firm has a relationship to the employee when it comes to matters of privacy and also respect. Um, Managers have access to all sorts of confidential employee information that has to be safeguarded and it has to be protected. And then the company itself has an obligation to have cyber protections to protect the sensitive personal information of all its employees from an outside intrusion. Um, and so that's also something that we don't often think about, but it is the organization's responsibility to safeguard your privacy and so forth, so your identity is not stolen. Um, there is another issue here with your relationship of the firm to the employee. How do they handle matters, very serious matters like complaints of sexual harassment or hostile work environment? Um, Do they have a quick and ethical response, or does the organization do foot dragging and make excuses or retaliate against the victim? These are all matters that are really about ethics. And so that's generally what we look at when we say we're talking about relationship of the firm to the employee. Now, when we talk about the employee to the firm, we're talking about some different issues. Um, how do employees treat the organization in general? Well, we could say conflicts of interest is one area. Um, Employees sometimes take second jobs, but the reason they take those second jobs can be very complicated and it can be related to their basic survival. So, a lot of times, these conflicts of interest can be beneficial to the employee, but not the organization. And it sort of depends what the conflict is. If there's say a gift given to you from a supplier of the organization, almost all organizations have policies against that. The thinking being you're being paid a wage, you're an agent of the company, you don't take anything else. And that's strictly a no-no. Um, but working a second job has more controversial implications, really. It depends on the organization how they view it. If they're not paying real high wages, they probably understand quite well that many employees that are on their current work roster might have second jobs simply because of the pay. And um, but in other organizations, um, they may look at it as a real conflict in the sense, well, maybe you're not sharp at work, maybe you're tired, maybe you're thinking about your other job, or maybe you're even using their resources like the internet or something, or their time to work for the other company in some way or have that bias. So that is their point of view and perspective. Um, so conflicts of interest are out there, and it just depends on the real business environment you're in generally. There are also matters of secrecy and confidentiality on the part of the employee. If there is proprietary information or patents or business secrets, those have to be safeguarded. Most of the time, in most states, it's illegal to divulge those sorts of secrets. It's a condition of your employment. You probably will sign a form to that effect. And violating that confidentiality and secrecy can be very harmful to an organization. So certainly that is an ethical concern. One of the biggest concerns out there is really related to honesty, and that takes several different forms. It's not just stealing from the organization, which happens at all levels, and just about anything of value or no value can be stolen by employees. But it's also bigger transgressions like falsifying expense accounts or even using organizational resources for personal use and so forth. Um, it really depends on the level that it's taken to, how egregious it can be, but certainly it is a matter of honesty. Um, when it comes to sick leave, this is a matter of contention, but it is also not just a matter of the employee to the firm, but also of the firm to the employee. In many places where you work, you may sign on to a job and read in all the literature you're given and so forth, and or hear during your orientation that you're allowed 6 sick days a year. And so you take 3 sick days over the first year you're there, and you get ready and you call in for that fourth sick day. And when you come back, you're informed that you violated the company policy on sick days and that you're over the limit. And so you wonder what is going on because you thought there would certainly be 6 sick days. Um, this is a practice many organizations do. It's an ethical concern because what might happen is if you take another sick day, or you may be cautioned at that point already saying, well, if it happens again, we'll put a letter in your personnel file about it and saying that you're not cooperating and you have a really what they consider a bad employee behavior. Um, so this is really an ethical issue. And certainly many people do take sick days when they're not sick. They take mental health days. This is America. It's well known that people take mental health days. Why do they do that? They do that because they're stressed out it, by their job, by their co-workers, by their tasks. And this is common, and we see it all the time. Um, it's just rampant out there. People get stressed. It's no secret in America that we work more hours than any other comparative mature market economy. We take less vacation days and so forth. We have higher rates of most of the stressful diseases like diabetes and heart disease and so forth. And it's generally a direct result of our work days. And we take less sick days. So in many respects, our work ethic works against us here. And it's an ethical concern, probably reciprocal between the employee and the firm. Um, we would have to admit that 1 out of 5 sick days is probably taken for some type of personal reason other than actually being sick. So for the employee, the perspective is it's something that's needed occasionally. For the organization, it's lost productivity and costs the company money. The third area of concern for managerial ethics and so forth is the relationship of the firm itself to other economic players that are out there. Other economic players or agents really are stakeholders. And these are individuals or organizations that really have a material interest in your success as an organization. And so they're going to include customers and competitors and your suppliers and stockholders if you have them, and the union if you have them, and so forth. So these are people that we want to please, that we want to continue to support us and so forth. And so that means we have to treat them with an ethical stance, that we have to be fair with them, that we have to follow the law. Um, and that includes our competitors as well. Um, we do not need to have a hostile attitude towards our competitors. That doesn't mean we can't have the highest, most aggressive competition ever, but we do not have to be hostile. And there's a big difference. There are some people that simply feel that because you're in the same business, that you are natural enemies and you have to be aggressive to each other. You don't. Your styles of management and marketing can be aggressive, but you never want to take it beyond that. That becomes unethical when you step over that line. Also, you can have organizational conflicts of interest, which is another ethical concern, because sometimes many of our industries are regulated by advocacy groups or organizations of all types that set guidelines and standards and so forth for the big players and the real players in any given industry. Well, what happens is that the people on those boards and those who make the rules quite often and work with the government to set the rules and standards are also the leaders of big corporations and companies who are working for profit. So they have a built-in conflict of interest. But of course, they're also experts in their industries and in the field. So you are kind of relying somewhat on self-controlled ethical behavior, but it is something that you have to acknowledge. I mean, certainly we have pharmacists who work for major drug chains and pharmaceutical firms are hold positions of power on state pharmacy boards and things like that. One other area of relationship to other economic players is really to stockholders and consumers and to the public in general, and that's about financial disclosure. You cannot be creative with your finances. It's not only unethical, it's illegal. And it really got pretty bad in the 1990s with corporate America, with Enron scandals and things like that, resulted in a law from Congress, the Sarbanes-Oxley Act. And it basically said that any financial disclosures that are released quarterly or for whatever reason by the IRS or any regulatory body are considered to have the signature of the CEO. And that means they put their personal stamp of authenticity on it. And therefore, they are now liable for the accuracy and the correctness of all that material. Whether or not it works, it is really hard to say. We still see corruption out there and so forth. Okay, folks, that's all I want to talk about this time. I'll talk to you again soon.